Hi, and welcome back to Chapter 4 of Skrælige after a very long time. This period of time in Skrælige history is known as the Isolation. The Norse settlements further east had all been abandoned, and so there weren't enough stopover points to reliably link Skrælige with the east, and in combination with the increased conflict with the native Abenaki, they were isolated from the rest of the world. With the cessation of eastward trade, Skræligborg could no longer sustain as many artisans as there were before, so a decent amount of them left the town to build new farms and just expand the territory, which led to the growth of Nordstader and the rebuilding of Middeltunga. The population generally just spread out a bit more. Relations with the native Abenaki were at the lowest point in history, so new fortifications were erected in Middeltunga and Erstein. Two new settlements were built further south, with Raspegia founded in 1414 and Middelsenburg settled across the channel on the island of Middelsen in 1423. Another impact of that isolation was reforestation. So previously, demand had been pretty high for timber in the Norse settlements on Greenland and Iceland because there weren't really many trees, or in the case of Greenland, they were all gone. So as some of the eastern settlements were abandoned, Skrælige picked up the slack in demand, but without any connection, there was a lot less clear-cutting of forests, some more trees could grow between the farm fields, and generally just reforested and improved the state of the environment. And finally, the lack of iron imports meant that copper mining and bronze working had to pick up the slack. Combined with the need for more metal for weaponry, with the native conflict ramping up, a small mining operation of Erstein had to grow. So new machines were built to lift mined ore from the caverns, and more houses were built to accommodate the larger operation, which made Erstein a town in its own right. So another effect of the cutoff of trade was an escalating conflict with the Abenaki. The growing population had spread out to be self-sufficient, and this meant regular competition with the Abenaki for hunting and fishing, and after a poor growing season in 1453, Skræligans grew bolder in their incursions into the interior of the island. In late October of that year, Abenaki fired arrows at one hunting party, injuring two and causing them to retreat. In earlier times, the plentiful trade and integrated cultures might have calmed things down, but instead, tensions escalated. Skræligan hunting parties began better arming themselves, firing back in minor skirmishes, and then it all came to a head on the night of the 2nd of November, when a small band of Skræligan militia went rogue and managed to sneak to the Abenaki village on Lake Aserban, launching a volley of flaming arrows and lighting the village on fire. The Abenaki who were on guard chased the militiamen and killed them, but it was too late. Several villagers were killed and the majority of the village burned to the ground, and this would be known as the Massacre of Abenakiborg. This arson had not been approved by the Thing of Skrælige, who were keen to not let things escalate too much, and the first knowledge of the attack was the sight of fire and smoke upstream. The citizens of Skrælige prepared for a counterattack, but none came that night. Instead, the surviving Abenaki retreated inland, abandoning the village that had once been the center of the larger tribe. For the next decades, there would be no peace between the Skræligans and Abenaki, with skirmishes continuing but no major battles. After that massacre, though, the Thing did approve exploration and raiding on the mainland. Up until then, long-distance merchants and fishermen had explored the area somewhat, but there had never really been any need or desire to expand outside of the main island of Storien itself. Skrælige was much more of an accidental settlement, too far from the Norse homeland to attract much immigration, but with enough resources and trade to easily support the settlement itself. With reduced resources, no trade, and hostile Abenaki, the Thing decided that they should look back to their ancestors and explore, potentially raiding any native settlements they found on the mainland. This nostalgia for Viking raids did not end well for the Skræligans, though. The tribes on the mainland, many of whom were also Abenaki, had already been warned of the Skraeligans, and the moment that any of them began to set foot on the mainland, the natives immediately fired arrows. In most cases, the Skraeligans just immediately retreated, and there were a couple of times when they didn't, but that just immediately led to bloodshed. By the 1470s, those mainland raids were stopped. By 1500, Skrælige was somewhat stagnant. It wasn't struggling. Apart from the isolated incidents in the 1450s, food had been sufficient for everyone, but it wasn't really prospering either. They weren't really able to expand off of the islands, and they had to give constant attention to the native conflict that they had sparked. As was tradition, another Manntal was commissioned in 1500. It found that there were 726 people living in Abenakiborg, which was down by about 167, but the total population of Skrælige had in fact increased to 1,264. It's a gain of 221 over the past 100 years. This change was nothing, though, in comparison to the big changes that were to come. For Skrælige, these big changes began on the 29th of January, 1509, when a large ship of an unknown design was sighted on the horizon. So on that cliffhanger, that ends Chapter 4, and also Part 1. So in Part 2, I'm planning on doing some more time lapses of the actual builds that I'm doing, assuming my computer doesn't blow up from trying to record while doing stuff. Fingers crossed it's held up decently well so far. Of course, there is the huge change that comes with the Columbian Exchange. So look forward to that eventually when I get around to it. And yeah, as usual, you can check the Skrælligen Ministry of Sagas website for the written version of all of this. I do have regular-ish updates on Twitter, and thanks so much for watching.